Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us at this lunchtime session. You've had the benefit of the extremely professional Steph McGovern comparing proceedings this morning so far. My name's Lee Hopley. I'm Chief Economist at EF, and I think for the next hour or so you should think of me as the work experience girl. The real experts I'll introduce in a second, but first, just a couple of words for me about what this session is really about this morning. It's about financing and investment, essentially, key factors for manufacturing. We had some GDP statistics out from the Office for National Statistics this morning, which showed that the UK economy seems to be firing on all cylinders, with the exception of business investment, which actually showed a relatively weak end to 2016. I think we're not going to be quick to interpret this as a bad omen going into 2017, but clearly there's a bit of a tightrope for the private sector when they're thinking about their investment plans for the next couple of years. On the one hand, we can see lots of growth and lots of opportunity for the manufacturing sector, but we're pretty clear that there are some big political risks, particularly on the horizon as well. In addition to that, as if the picture wasn't complicated enough, we had some statistics from the British Business Bank yesterday, which showed that a scarily high proportion of SMEs, about 70%, would rather have a lower rate of growth than go and access external finance in order to support their growth and investment plans. And I think that is a bit of a worrying omen for the UK's investment performance going forward. We have some experts with us that are going to guide us through this session from the manufacturing sector and also from our sponsors, Lombard and NatWest. And without further ado, I shall introduce them to the stage. We have Alan Ainsbury, who is Head of Trade and International Sales at NatWest. Stuart, who's Chairman of Metal Assemblies. David Holmes, who is the Business Manager at Redco Limited, and Hiten Sonpal, Head of Specialist Sectors at Lombard. All of these gentlemen will be very keen to take any of your questions and comments, but first we'll hear some introductory remarks from all the speakers. We shall kick off, first and foremost, with David Holmes from Redco. That's a specialist plastics and engineering company. And we have a short video which explains a bit more about his business.
Redco started 31 years ago, supplying plastics to local industry. We've now expanded to be a national distributor and a full subcontract machine shop as well. Our machinery is very advanced. Over the years, we've upgraded our machines to the latest technology to enable us to meet the demands of our customers. We have a long history with the bank. They've helped us purchase the buildings that we're into now. We've also had a lot of experience with Lombard, who have helped us purchase the majority of the machinery that's sitting in our workshop.
I've worked with David for about 10 years. We have traditionally been involved in financing some of the assets within the business, such as his machining centres, forklift trucks and vehicles. I contact David normally around 3 to 4 times a year. I also let him know if there's anything coming up in the market that I think he'll be interested in. We had a renewable energy seminar that came up, and I invited Dave to come along and listen to Hiten, our green energy specialist, to see whether a biomass project or any kind of green energy supply would be interesting to him as a business.
Well, our new buildings didn't have any heating, so a biomass boiler with the government incentives that come with it just seemed like the absolutely perfect solution to heat the new buildings.
David got in touch with me and sent me a specification of his biomass boiler and asked me to get involved in the funding of it. Lombard will normally only get involved in funding the actual project once the machine is installed and commissioned, but as is always the nature of these projects, it usually takes some time for the project to be implemented, planned and installed. So we had to get other parts of the bank involved to help us, and that's when I spoke to Roger in our international trade team.
The biomass boiler came about from my contacts at Lombard, and it seemed likely that we would need to put some funding in place. The funding took the form of a bridging loan.
I've worked with Roger on a number of projects before, and on this instance I felt that his expertise would be invaluable. He's able to fund the project for the stage payments to the supplier until such time that Lombard could get involved with the actual funding.
What makes it attractive from our point of view is that the commercial bank Lombard and my part of the bank, transaction services, have the ability to be joined up. We can approach credit with a proposition where we are looking to bridge the payments to the supplier.
The finance deal was very complicated as it involved a variety of stage payments to our biomass supplier. The bank helped fund the stage payments, and then Lombard basically came in to refinance the whole deal at the end of the project. I was really impressed by the patience shown by all parties involved, including the bank and Lombard. It was a good example of teamwork.
We were very keen to support the growth of the business, particularly the move between premises, and we knew that would enable David to become far more efficient, reduce costs, and that's why we were very happy to support this request and why you can see this wonderful boiler standing behind me.
I've been working with Redco for about 10 years, and during that time you really do build up a great relationship with the customer. It's really important to ensure I understand exactly where they're planning to go, what their growth aspirations are, and how I can help them with the next stage of their projects.
Well, the future of Redco is looking bright. The biomass boiler has been a fantastic investment for us. I have happy staff, as the buildings are always nice and warm to work in, and the government incentive scheme gives me a really, really good return. We are ineffectively heating our buildings for free. We're looking to take on some more staff, and yeah, we're looking for a really good 2017.
Great. Well, that's a really positive story to start with. It sounds like you've been busy, and you've certainly been keeping Lombard and NatWest busy over the last couple of years. David, tell us a bit about what sat behind your investment decisions and how you went about thinking about external finance for those investments.
Okay, yeah, well, as an independent, sort of quite small family-run SME, it's really important for us to remain flexible. We've got sort of an ever-evolving customer base, really, and we have to keep moving. So in 2012, we took the decision to basically look for a new site, which would give us a good platform for growth, really. So the investment since then really has been all to do with that growth. We basically purchased some new property with the help of NatWest, just on a standard finance basis. And then we had about a 2-year plan to move in. We had a sitting tenant basically, so we knew they were going to move out within a couple of years. So they did, as planned, and then we were able to basically refurbish all of the units ready for us to move into. The refurbishment plan was funded through NatWest bank loan, combinations from dilapidations payment from a tenant, a government grant as well, which we were helped with by the bank, and the sale of existing units as well. So it didn't really affect cash flow of the business. So it was we were quite lucky, really. It's a nice way of doing things. The actual idea for the biomass boiler, as per the video, actually came from a Lombard green energy seminar, which was hosted by Hiten here on my left-hand side. I was invited by our local finance manager to attend, and basically I hadn't heard anything about biomass before, and I was just absolutely hooked by the end of it. It just seemed a perfect solution to us because our buildings didn't have heating anyway. So it's the opportunity to sort of heat your buildings for a much reduced cost was a real bonus. Didn't take much persuasion from my MD, Mike, to actually let me proceed with the project. So that went, it was quite an easy decision. It wasn't all plain sailing, unfortunately. It did take a while to source the supplier. It was quite difficult, actually. It's an interesting market. There's a lot of people trying to sell the systems, but I did find a lot of them were trying to sell a solution that was best for them rather than best for us. So we actually took the time, or I took the time to find a Norfolk-based company, actually, called Core Biomass, who were able to put a bespoke system in for us, which really does work well. So, as outlined in the video, there was a slight financing issue in that due to Lombard's sort of financing rules about getting the boiler can only be financed when it's in situ and stage payments, etc. There was a bit of a problem, but it was a really good example of teamwork from everyone within our banking group, and I've got a really good relationship with our local banking, or my local banking team, and they're able to put the deal together and make it happen. So, it was. Although we hit a stumbling block, it was a really great example of even a big company, I think, can actually start working together to provide a good solution for us.
And clearly these kind of big projects are never without their stumbling blocks. But what does this tee you up to do now and in the future?
Well, following the actual move, because obviously the boiler was part of a bigger move to new premises, following the move, we actually did experience a bit of a slump due to oil and gas prices dropping, as I'm sure a lot of people are aware of. So, that did affect us a little bit. It's a bit of bad timing. However, due to our flexibility and our ability to sort of seek out new customers, we got over the hump quite nicely, actually. So we were able to move the business forwards, and that was definitely down to having the space really to move on. The boiler itself has been a really good success. As I stated in the video, it's, the staff morale's fantastic. So I've got, warm buildings and people like working in the warmth. It's funny. So that's been really good from a staff morale point of view and attracting new staff as well. We've got a really good facility there. Financially, it's also been a success. We've in effect heated our buildings for free for this year. We're in our first year of RHI payments, which is a government scheme to reimburse you for green energy. So we're actually, we're kind of zero heating costs, and we've approximately got about £5,000 on top of that as well, which, so it's a nice return. Moving forwards, I expect the return of investment to be around about £25,000–30,000 a year for our system. So that's really, yeah, I'm quite impressed with that myself, really. Just aside from the financial return, something that is really important to me is obviously, the green credentials for the system. We're reducing our CO2 impact and are reducing our carbon footprint, which I think is we all need to do our bit as companies. So I'm really proud to say that, we've done our bit with this, and we've also introduced some energy efficient lighting as part of the project as well, to help with that really. So I'm really proud of what we've done, and hopefully it inspires others as well, because I think we all need to do our bit, and it's quite important. Finally, last little bonus we've just achieved as well is our ISO 14001, which is environmental management certification as well. So as part of this project, we've now been able to achieve that. And that sits now nicely alongside our quality and health and safety certs as well. So, yeah, it's been really, really positive. I mean, I'm really confident that we've invested a lot of money in the business, but I'm really, really confident that our infrastructure now sets us up to, potentially do a bit more exporting, as I think, discussed this morning, because that's something we don't do as much of at the moment. But our infrastructure's there now to seek out some new customers and move forward. So things are looking really good for us. Great.
That does sound like a really strong foundation for the future. But looking in the rearview mirror, is there anything that you would have done differently?
I think so, yeah. It's around the finance deal, actually. I suppose maybe a little bit of naivety on my part, if I'm being honest. But with the boiler deal, I was quite enthusiastic about the whole scenario, and I didn't realise the complexity of how the finance might work with regards to Lombard not being able to finance the deal until the boiler was in situ. We had to import the boiler from Denmark, and there were a number of issues. Fortunately, the international trade team stepped in to help it. But I think in hindsight, I'd have just gone back to basics, taken a couple of steps back, made sure I had more conversations with my finance teams first, just to sort of make sure I knew everything was going to happen, because it could have caused embarrassment, really, and some difficulties. So that's anything I would say I'd do differently on investment.
And this is probably a good time to bring you in. It sounds like you were kind of quite instrumental in this investment kind of coming about in the first place. But clearly there's some complexity around the financing of this particular investment. I mean, from an external finance provider's perspective, what should companies be thinking about when they're making these decisions or generating the ideas in the first instance?
I think from our point of view, keeping us in the loop from the beginning very much, because we do sometimes get FDs and MDs picking up the phone and saying there's a machine arriving tomorrow, can you help us on the finance? And that does cause a little bit of an issue, but at the same time for us it's very much about making sure that we tailor something for the customers that works for them. And just like David's mentioned, we tried to put a solution together that we couldn't accommodate. So we introduced our International Services Department in order to try and facilitate that process for them and give the comfort to David's business to make sure that that's going to be coming from Denmark in one piece and not an empty box, and it's going to be installed and then the payment gets made to the suppliers. So yeah, from our point of view, that's very important. I think external finance for businesses is very much the oil in the engine. It keeps the business growing. There are customers who prefer to use their own liquid assets, which is fine. But for myself, and I was talking to Stuart earlier on with regards to this, investment is really, really important in order to keep ahead of the game, keep competitive, improving efficiencies and productivity, and with asset finance we can help UK manufacturing businesses to do that.
I mean, you gave the example of sometimes companies approach you when they've got a really quick short-term opportunity, but how do you see asset finance supporting long-term growth ambitions?
So I think long-term ambitions is very much about, we get manufacturing businesses that approach us and say we're looking to invest in a specific piece of machinery because we've been awarded a contract for circa 3, 4, 5 years. There are customers who prefer to own the asset and run it until the course of however the longevity of the life of the asset is. But there are other solutions that we can provide to tailor the needs of the business on what they're looking to achieve from there. For example, we had a manufacturing business that had been awarded a contract for 3 years, but there was no guarantee the contract would be renewed. So we provided an operating lease scenario where the client had the flexibility of either extending the 3 years if the contract was extended on the finance payments, hand it back with no risk, so we take all the risk on ourselves, and not having to worry about selling the asset if the contract wasn't renewed. Very much like leasing a vehicle. You run it for 3 years, hand it back, and then you go and get a new one. That takes the liability off the customer's balance sheet, and they know that they've got fixed payments for the full period of the contract, which then gives them the ability of calculating their return on the contract as well.
Thanks. Can I come to you, Stuart, Chairman of Metal Assemblies? Company is over 50 years old, part of the automotive supply chain, privately owned, employs over 100 people. You've got a slightly different investment story, which was opportunistic and something you were able to really capitalise on. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Okay, well, we operate in the automotive industry, tier 2 principally, and we constantly have to update our equipment to be in that industry, basically. So the back end of last year, we were looking to buy probably 2 new presses, and the opportunity came up. A dealer came to us who had come across a factory in Slovakia that was closing down and selling off all their equipment. So my managing director went out there to have a look at it, and it turned out this place was only about 2 or 3 years old. The German owners had fallen out with the Slovakian government in some way or other. The equipment was all being sold off. I had a phone call from my managing director from inside the factory, and he sounded like a kid in a sweetie shop, basically. He was looking at over 20, almost brand new, 400-ton presses, which was the sort of stuff we were looking for. And so at that point, our strategy became a little bit more opportunistic, and we decided we weren't looking for 2, we were probably looking for 3 presses. So we put together a deal. The UK dealer who had was disposing of this equipment was able to put together a deal with the confidence that we had finance from Lombard, so that he brought the presses over to the UK. It wasn't until the presses were at our factory in the UK that Lombard actually signed the deal and the guy got paid. But what with our money up front and so on, we did something that worked for everybody. We also got finance off the bank for a loan to help us with the VAT, because at the point where you're paying the VAT, and you don't effectively get that back into your cash flow until your next VAT payment. So that meant that we put together something that worked for us. So we bought a 200-ton press, which replaced a very old press that was really on its last legs. That's in production now. We bought a 300-ton press, which is back up to an existing modern 300-ton press. We bought a 400-ton press, which is back up to an existing modern 400-ton press. And we expect that probably in the next 3 to 6 months, those machines will all be in production and all be used. We've got orders from European tier 1 automotive companies, and we've got contracts going to European production lines, BMW, Porsche, also stuff in the UK. So these machines are going to be fully utilised. The other thing that I thought was very interesting was that the entire factory was being shut down. all brand new equipment, and all of those presses, as I said, there was over 20 of them. These are the sort of things that brand new would cost £300,000–500,000. All of those presses ended up being bought by British companies, some of them going to East European located but British-owned factories, but some of them also coming to the UK. But all of them went to UK companies, which I think is quite a good story in itself.
How important do you think those investments were then in terms of anchoring yourself in the supply chain of those automotive companies, both in the UK and across Europe?
Well, you basically have to have modern equipment to be in this market. We've got some old equipment, but you have to have new equipment, and you have to have a strategy that says this is how we're going to refresh our production equipment. Because the new machine that we're buying will operate at twice the speed of the old machines. They've got built-in overload protection, so you can't crash them, and you can't harm the machine in the same way as the old machines. You can make tooling with the confidence that the machine isn't going to smash the tooling. It's just, in every respect, it just works better.
There's been, I think, a bit of discussion about productivity already today. Does the UK have a problem? I mean, how front of mind is productivity when you're thinking about these decisions, or is that just a secondary outcome?
Well, principally, what my business is trying to do is make money. And actually, that's what I think every business is trying to do. Because of the way the world works, if you do that, and if you're successful at that, your productivity must improve. So we didn't buy these machines to improve productivity, but buying these machines will improve our productivity.
Thank you. Alan, so thinking about the relationship that you build with your clients when they're looking at some of their long-term thinking and some of these more opportunistic investment opportunities that come up, what's important from a NatWest perspective in building those relationships?
So I think it's really important that a client speaks to their bankers, and I think David and Hiten touched on it earlier, so they can see what the whole range of services are available to them. So when they enter into a conversation, they can actually look at it and see what is the best position for them, rather than just thinking about the Lombard finance and doing the transaction and then actually worrying about the payments later. By actually giving the bank your finance and insight as to how you're thinking, they can work with you and understand your business, and then work with you to put in place the correct solution for your business, rather than do it on a case-by-case basis. It's more about a partnership, I believe, than a piecemeal exercise.
And, obviously, Stuart's example had an international dimension in terms of where the equipment was coming from. Do you think that adds complexity, or it adds a perceived amount of complexity, maybe for an SME?
I think there is a perception that transacting, whether you're selling overseas or whether you're buying from overseas, there is a perception that it is hugely difficult. But I think if you break that down to a very base level, every manufacturer buys and sells. So whether you buy and sell within the UK or whether you buy and sell overseas, that transaction is exactly the same. You'll either be sending something and receiving money for it, or you'll be selling something, buying it, and either way. But actually, there are a few other complexities. The currency overlay there, and we talked about currency, but there are ways that you can overcome that. So I think it's really important that you have a conversation at early stages of any contract negotiation with your financer, so you can understand what the risks are to you. You can understand how you may mitigate those risks. So when you go into that negotiation, and interesting, David and I were talking about this earlier, you're not overcome with the enthusiasm of signing what's a great deal. Actually, you understand exactly what you're getting into, and you are negotiating from a position of strength, because that's the benefit of working with your financer. They can tell you what is of benefit to you and what you shouldn't actually do from a buying and selling perspective. And interestingly, depending on which way you're advising, whether you're advising an exporter or whether you're advising an importer, you may advise them slightly differently because they're on the different sides of the transaction. But I think that's primarily why it's really important to any contract you engage at an early stage.
Okay. Thank you. That's enough questions for me for now. Do we have any questions or comments from the floor? Got one just here. Thanks, number one.
Afternoon, my name is Simon Broadbent, Thomas Broadbent, Huddersfield. We supply machinery for the laundry industry in the UK, and we often, or have used Lombard in the past to provide that finance to our customers to enable them to buy the equipment. But the problem with this initial finance is one that my two main competitors, one German and one Danish, don't have. Their package allows them to provide the finance to cover the installation, commissioning and all the upfront costs, whereas I've got to cover that from if you like, my balance sheet until the Lombard kick in. You know, what is the problem?
It's not a question that I've not had before. We're an asset finance company, so the asset is our security. Unlike if you go to a bank, they have land or building security, which is their collateral to lend against, and it's very much a commercial loan. So if you have a car, for example, and you go to the dealership, you order your car, if we had to pay for the car to be built before it was delivered, our security would be in very much a Meccano set without us actually having a full end product with a resale value to it. And I think that's very much what it is down to. But Lombard does have options where stage payments can be accommodated in certain circumstances, but also it's very much based on the credit covenant of the end user that we're dealing with as well. But we do have the ability of making stage payments. But in most cases, if we're unable to help, a bit like what David's scenario was in the biomass boiler case study, we had our colleagues in international trade to help us provide those stage payments. So again, something definitely to explore, and we'll be happy to talk to you after this seminar to see how we can kind of facilitate that for you.
I think with the international option that David alluded to, I think we put in place an LC there, which was a contingent liability until the goods were actually shipped. So by working on that basis, we were fairly certain that the production of the machine was going to be made, it was going to be shipped to the correct place and delivered to the correct place, and there were certain things that mitigated the other risks around that. So whether you can use that from a domestic type transaction as well would be an interesting concept, but an LC is as good to trade domestically as it is to trade overseas. So certainly we could have a conversation to see where we come up with a structure across the transactional service piece, moving into the Lombard piece that would put you in a better position you are in the moment. And again, I'm happy to have that conversation.
Great, thank you, Hiten and Alan. Any further questions?
Hello. Sorry, my name's...
Oh, sorry, apologies. Thank you.
Slightly different perspective on the previous question statement. We've just spent £800,000 on two manufacturing presses. They're not 400 tonnes, they're 30 tonnes, but they're very sophisticated powder metallurgy compaction tools. But they're bought from a Swiss manufacturer, and we went to British and our normal places to get finance for this, and yes, they'll do the lease finance. But the Swiss government-based insurance scheme will let you have the thing without having to pay anything. It's like a 10% down, and you pay for it in the future. Whereas in our normal places, which we use, national banks, you have to pay for it all before the credit clicks in. So that is an impediment to growth, because we could grow faster if we could have more of these Swiss-type deals when you buy their equipment.
Is that something that panellists see much, where UK companies perhaps don't have access to the same kind of support that is available in other countries?
Well, I think that the UK government are becoming increasingly active in assisting both inward investment and export as well. I don't understand, I must admit, the Swiss scale.
I very much think, and it's a really good point actually, and it is something that we did come across, not in the manufacturing sector, but in the renewable sector, where there was a number of manufacturers in European countries where they had government-backed guarantees in order to support them. And I think it's probably a call for our UK government to do something very similar to support those kind of initiatives. where we were able to lean on the guarantee that was provided by the European country in order to support the transition period of the manufacturer to build the actual product, deliver it into the UK, and then we provided the finance to the end user. And it's a great way of facilitating it, and we have done that with a number of European continents in the past. So yes, it is something that we can do, but again, it's not something that's regularly done because it's not common in the market. But when it is, we do have the facilities and the ways of actually facilitating that for manufacturers.
My finance director was believe it, so such a good deal.
I think there's a great opportunity for you to pick up the phone to Lombard next time.
I'd be very interested to have a conversation, because what we try and do is try to understand where those niches are. And two examples. So with David's, we developed something called capital import finance, which was to work alongside Lombard to help clients who are sourcing overseas large capital goods. The other thing we actually looked at as well, was very close to the manufacturing business, was tooling finance as well, where some manufacturers have to pay up front for the tool that they produce. So we work again very closely to try and understand that, and to then put in place a solution that works for our clients. So I'd be very interested to understand what that is, to see whether we can work and come up with something that may work for all our other clients as well.
Just a quick question for David and Stuart. I mean, we quite often look at other countries enviously about what's available from other governments. I mean, is that something that you've had experience of, or indeed is there something that you've experienced that's particularly good in the UK?
I think in my experience, we now, with RBS, we are getting finance on tooling when we're making them in the automotive industry, and that's very positive in my opinion. We've got orders, and we're expecting more orders on the basis that we can finance it in that way. It's not something we advertise to all of our customers, because if they can afford to finance it, I'd rather they financed it. But it's there, and it's helping us to compete with foreign countries.
Great. We have another question.
Paul Goodman, Chairman of the National Association of Commercial Finance Brokers. Question that two of our long-standing patrons are sat on the stage, NatWest and Lombard. I guess there's a question for the EF as well. Lee, you mentioned some stats earlier from the BBA with regards to 70% of SMEs not looking to invest because of fears of access to finance. What can we do as a collective to raise awareness that there are many options to finance across the whole of the spectrum. We've talked about some specific issues here. There are many options out there. What can we do to raise that awareness more across the country? And specifically with NatWest and Lombard, it's not a question of fighting over the slices in the pie. It's making the pie bigger for everybody, because that will affect the whole of the supply chain positively.
Well, actually, maybe if I start with NatWest and Lombard colleagues to say a bit about what you are doing to engage with customers who may have previously been switched off, thinking particularly post-financial crisis, bringing them kind of back into the external finance world for their investment.
So I think it's a case of talking to clients and telling them what's available to them, and again, not just in specific parts of the organisation, but across the whole of the organisation. And to my point earlier around, why should we engage earlier? That's the whole point, so we can get across that message. I think the things that we could do, the video today is an excellent example of how we've helped one of our clients. One of the best ways to educate other clients is to demonstrate what we can actually do. So getting more of those messages out in terms of examples of how we've helped other companies in this sector. So I think those are the two things we could actually do more of, and we could do better.
Is there a business perspective on what you would like to see banks doing more of? I'm putting you on the spot. From an EF perspective, events like this, which offer up case studies, good examples of practical support that you can offer that allows businesses, manufacturing businesses, to be successful on the global stage, I think is really key. Are there any further questions or comments from the floor? I will take this opportunity to ask one more then. I'm going to come back to you, Hiten, because we've talked many times about the environmental dimension of investments and companies thinking about how they can improve their energy efficiency, for example. What sort of practical tips and support are you really offering industry at the moment in that respect?
You're asking me to do my last speaker session again, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think I've been literally immersed in renewables and energy efficiency since 2010, and it's probably the best thing that I've seen in my career since I've been in Lombard for the last 18 years, where we've gone out, educated customers, and demonstrated the benefits of it, and David is living proof of it, so thank you very much for being here today. We're simple seminars, and again, making them aware of what is out there. Because I remember in the old days when we were talking about RHI, and acronyms is not always a good thing where people don't know about it, but somebody actually referred to it as the Royal Horticultural Institute, but it's actually the Renewable Heat Incentive. So it just shows not a lot of people are aware of these government incentives. But for me, I think if you've got a business where you're trying to grow, and as Stuart mentioned, everyone's looking to increase sales, turnover, profit margins and all of that, I think sometimes you just need to take stock and take a step back and look at our own businesses internally and what can we do to become a lot more efficient. So LED lighting has probably seen the biggest growth in our business from a financing point of view, where we've seen UK businesses invest over the last couple of years because of the benefits. 4 or 5 years ago, people weren't really convinced, but technology has moved on and the efficiencies of LED have really, really improved. And we're seeing paybacks between 18 months to 2.5 years, where you're seeing customers, if you have a standard light bulb, let's say hypothetically it utilizes 10 kilowatts to create a minute's worth of electricity or lighting, and you put an LED light in and it will only use 2 kilowatts, but it will still give you the same output, but much more higher lux levels, which is the brightness of the light, and your electricity cost from X goes down to Y. So the case study we used earlier on had an energy bill per annum of circa £80,000, and just by changing their lighting to LED, that went down to 11.5. So an 85% reduction in their energy bill, which automatically is added on to their profit margin, which means that they can stay competitive in the market and in the future win more business from that. But the green credentials is just as important, because I know we talk about supply chain, and David and I picked up before this conference, and they call it the 110-100 rule, where you've got the large corporates at the top. They've got a carbon tax that they need to pay if they don't hit a target by the end of the year. So they go down to the 10 suppliers below them, and those 10 go down to the 100 below them. But whether you're directly or indirectly involved with a large corporate, they benefit from all of that carbon reduction. So in effect, it's not just about price anymore, it's also about green credentials as well, and Redco are demonstrating that now.
I think this reminds me, we were chatting earlier, David, about the one piece of advice that you had for the delegates here today.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the one piece of advice I can give is you know, I know we're all busy in our working lives, but just take that time out to listen to your finance providers. I mean, I'd have never have known about this biomass system, or you know, what it can give us if I didn't, you know, attend, you know, a seminar for half an hour in the morning. So I think, just get out there, listen to your finance providers and see what it's about. Yeah, it's not always going to be for you, but, you know, if you hit the one thing that is, we'd be in a lot worse position, you know, if we didn't have this. You know, it's just been fantastic for us financially and from a, you know, from a company point of view as well. So, yeah, just listen to your providers, really.
That's a good note to almost end on. I have one job for you in the audience. We've got a quick interactive voting question about your own investment plans over the next year or so. So the question, yeah, great, thank you. So which of the following, if any of these, have had a positive impact on your investment plans at the moment? So is it just that business conditions are improving? Is it because you're getting good support from your finance provider? You're seeing increasing requirements coming from your customers? It's just part of your long-term strategy to grow, or you're not planning to increase investments in the next year? Vote now. That is actually a good note to end on. Positive that we've got lots of strategic companies here thinking about long-term growth. That can only be good for UK manufacturing. And I hope in support of those plans to grow and invest, you've picked up some useful insight and tips from our businesses here and from the finance providers, Lombard and NatWest. If I could ask you just to thank them in the usual way. Thank you very much.